So I thought I'd, in my 20 minutes, go through three kind of blocks of discussion. One might be redundant, looking at the agenda of the past day and this morning, but just a little bit about what's going on in the industry, and I might fly through that, and then talk about Splunk and MuleSoft. What are we actually doing together? And then a little bit about Splunk, so that I can plug my own company. How many people out here actually have used Splunk before or know Splunk? All right, good representation. Do those three blocks make sense? Okay. So what I heard this morning and what I've seen through the conference is what you guys know and live every single day. We're going through probably what I would consider the biggest change I've ever seen in computing in the IT landscape. I started in this industry back in '87, '88 as a developer. And just about that time, we're going from the mini computer revolution to the beginnings of the client server revolution, and was lucky enough to be at Oracle just post IPO up until the early 90s, then a company called PowerSoft, next generation integrated development environment, object-oriented tool set, until they went public and got bought by Sybase, and then Patrol Software, which was supposed to be the next generation monitoring framework all around client server. And in that kind of late 80s to 2001 world, the entire tech landscape just got blown apart. Now, everyone that had the last generation mainframe, mini computer, 3GL type skills was confused on how they're going to find their way forward. And IT departments were hammered beyond all belief. And some of you guys look way too young to have gone through that. But how are we going to swap out mainframe technology for Unix-based systems, for next-generation C#, C++, Java technologies, for graphical user interface front ends, incorporate PCs into a network that are supposed to be throwaway tools that we all used in our homes? And that was pretty disruptive. But what I've seen the past 5 years makes that look like a playground. Because there's not just a technological disruption that's happening, but business models are being completely upended because of technology. And everything that the way we do work is completely changing. This next generation of software development lifecycle and rapid rise of containerization and microservices and APIs everywhere, and for anyone that's managing developers, and I spent half my career managing developers, the way that you get work done is night and day versus what you did even 7 or 8 or 9 years ago. Is that something that you guys feel in your work every day? And what I put down here, most of these, sorry, they're one slide ahead on here. Every industry is feeling the effects of what does it mean to be digital. The interesting piece is all the news stories we hear about are the next generation companies, the companies that are disrupting the incumbents, but the incumbents are actually finally reacting. And Splunk deals with both sides. We deal with smaller companies that are trying to be disruptive, and then we deal with the giants that are actually trying to figure out how do they transform their business. So companies like Siemens or Bosch or BMW or Ford or GE are actually asking fundamental questions about how do I make money? If I'm turning into a software company more than a products company, or software is the lead value prop in these hard assets that I distribute, what do I charge for? Do I give away the product and charge for the service? How do I actually do that? More importantly, how do they transition to be a software company, and how do they attract the talent and skills and capabilities of people that are necessary to make them on par with the armies of people that the Apples and the PayPals and the Shazams and the Facebooks and the Googles and ideally the Splunks are able to attract. And when I look at what MuleSoft is trying to do, what Splunk is trying to do, and what thousands of other companies are trying to do is ultimately we've got to help each of you and each of your companies be significantly more productive and capable to compete in this digital revolution without having to source all the skills and all the talent. That's going to be harder and harder for companies that are not in hotbed areas like Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston, some of the bigger cities internationally, and still find a way to compete. That makes sense with what you guys are seeing? Okay. So, MuleSoft, Splunk, core questions. How do you build, if we're moving to a a completely virtualized microservices world where it's almost impossible. The actual application or the thing that you're consuming may be dying and rebuilding on a microsecond basis, and the actual underlying hard elements are not associated in any distinct way with those microservices. How do you build this composable enterprise? Because other than the brand new startups down the street that are starting from scratch, most of us are dealing with a whole host of systems, some that might even go way back to those dinosaur days of mainframes and mini computers, but certainly a lot of client-server systems, a lot of last-generation ERP systems, and for most of our customers, thousands, if not tens of thousands, of custom-developed applications that are going to be difficult to immediately containerize and immediately throw into an AWS or Azure landscape. So you've got this difficult challenge of, my business is running on 5 or 15 or 20-year-old technology. I can't dump it right away. I'm moving all my new dollars into next-gen development. Awesome. It's providing a lot of new UI, speed, and capability, but I've got to manage those two together. And part of what I'm so excited about with MuleSoft and the capability that they drive is they help the development teams bridge those two worlds, be able to procure next-generation SaaS and not yet brand name-oriented systems so that they can move at the speed of light with these harder systems, larger systems, less composable systems, so you can get a seamless fabric and serve your customers the way you want to. So the hybrid model is critical. It's certainly critical for Splunk, and I think it's one of the key aspects that we've found with MuleSoft. I'll talk about how we use MuleSoft. Ironically, we have only one application I know of that's on-prem, so we are not a hybrid consumer. We're a cloud-based consumer. But being able to expose the network and the business processes across these different application hops for the logical service, irrespective of whether those initial applications were ever architected to provide that type of visibility. For Splunk, for those of you who don't know Splunk, I'll go a little bit more into what we do, but we are a big data player. We're able to ingest up to petabytes per day of data of all types, semi-structured, non-structured, all different types of what we call machine data, and we're able to spit out a time series index in the back end on a kind of millisecond type basis. So I'll give a little bit more color on what we do. But the combination of Splunk and MuleSoft, all these different SaaS apps, and my resident last generation legacy apps really provides with Splunk the ability to get a view, a single pane of glass across this super confusing landscape. So how do you see from a mobile app or from a microservice all the way through to some type of data commit and back out to the user what the health of that service looks like? How do we do it in a secure way, given that you're hopping multiple different networks and segments, many public cloud hops in most cases, and allow the organization to respond, but IT organization respond in real time. But I think some of the advantages that we all have now for those of us that are in IT development, app development, and middleware is a lot of the tools that we're using now become business relevant to a sales leader, a marketing leader, a development leader, a leader of distribution or procurement in ways that they weren't ever relevant before. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're using MuleSoft to help us do that internally. So that's the Splunk and MuleSoft building this composable network and environment for organizations. So our journey with MuleSoft. We actually, as a company, have moved from a freemium downloadable model when we started in 2005, 2006, 2007. We still have that. Anyone can go from anywhere in the world can go to Splunk.com, find the same bits that some of our bigger customers are using to process a petabyte or 2 petabytes a day of data, literally the exact same bits, download them to their independent laptop, and start to play with Splunk in the same way that, I'll talk about CocaCola later, in the same way that CocaCola or a BMW or a Siemens or a Ford would on the upper end scale. But we've been moving from that to a cloud-first business. All of our core releases are cloud-first now. The growing body of users within Splunk are cloud users on a growth rate basis, even though the company started with on-prem. I don't see on-prem going away for Splunk. We need to be close to the origination of data and allow those resident data, those applications and data repositories are not moving directly to the cloud right away. But I view cloud as being our primary focus area for the next 5 to 10 years and the prominent aspect of our business. We've moved everything to cloud. And in addition to that downloadable trial that you can still get within Splunk, we're seeing the majority of our customers fire up an instantaneous free cloud trial. And that has been pretty impactful for us as an organization because we now need a real-time connectivity across all of our non-connected cloud systems and some of our internal systems, the handful of systems we have on-prem, that doesn't disrupt the customer experience. So we've moved to this cloud-first orientation within our customer base, and we are basically a SaaS apps company. If I go back to, there we go. If I go back to where were we when we first started talking to MuleSoft, it was pre-IPO, 2011, 2012. We went public in April of 2012. And we were like most companies, we're a Salesforce user, a NetSuite user, a Box user, we're a very cloud-centric company, and we were trying to use the old-fashioned ETL tools to connect these different services, and it was not going well, as any of you that lived through that time period got to experience. In addition, our business was changing rapidly. Back in 2011, 2012, we were about 90 million in revenue. We just closed our last fiscal year in January at 668 million. We were probably 250 employees. We just closed this last year at over 2,200. So a lot of growth that we were experiencing, adding 50, 100 people per quarter at that point in time. And without a far more agile framework to connect our applications and serve our internal employee population, we were going to be in deep trouble. And we were starting this move from a downloadable on-prem orientation to a cloud-first orientation. And we're having lots of problems getting customers connected to that cloud experience, given that their email or user ID were stored in different systems. Our e-commerce capability wasn't well connected to the identity system that they're utilizing. So we were having both internal app and agility issues at the same time that we're having customer experience issues. Got it. Look up there to see what's actually painting. Since that time, we've moved to MuleSoft being our enterprise integration platform. So I should have asked Declan, our CIO, this before I hopped on stage, but I'm guessing 40, 50, 60 plus systems, Declan, are interconnected and operate as one seamless unit because of MuleSoft. And again, all these systems, all business functions, whether it's our forecasting system on top of Salesforce, our analytics systems, our Splunk systems, our Workday HR system, they're all talking to each other through MuleSoft. In addition, our cloud service, for any of you that want to go try it out, you can go to splunk.com. We've now enabled a far more effective customer experience. I still would love us to raise the bar significantly over the next 4, 5, 6 months and what that experience looks like. But I'll walk through some of the changes that happen as we were able to hook the different components that make up our cloud system together through MuleSoft. So our customers got significantly faster onboarding. We've got a whole different orchestration capability between our sales systems, order systems, finance systems through MuleSoft. But then on the Splunk side, we're actually able to Splunk these different cloud applications so that I can see how are my users interacting with Salesforce or interacting with Workday. And through MuleSoft, I can see the relationship between those different applications. What we had on the on-prem basis with a lot of the last generation systems, where I could actually define a service, the logical service that has a bunch of convoluted heterogeneous components underneath it, and try and track that service, and then maybe even do some advanced stuff like optimization of flows across that service. That's where we're trying to get to with MuleSoft and the ability to provide analytics and visibility around this central hub that's the connector across these different systems. So from a results basis, okay, good. We've moved from, I think even a few months ago, it was up to 5 minutes to provision a cloud instance. I think we started years ago with a couple of hours to provision once you said, I want to actually move from a trial to a provisioned system to under 3 seconds. All of our cloud-based systems are connected now, so we actually have good transactional flow between our Active Directory system and Workday, between our Order Desk and Salesforce and NetSuite, between our Viso forecasting system and Salesforce. And the agility and capability of our IT department and what our users and customers are experiencing makes us much more on par with what I feel we need to do to continue to grow at 40, 50, 60% like we have. All right, so that's our story together. How can we work together to help you? So let me go back to who is Splunk? What do we actually do? We started in 2004, 2005 with a really simple problem statement that Eric Swan and Rob Doss, our two technical founders, were trying to solve. They were the classic systems administrators and IT ops guys that were sick of being on midnight to 4 a.m. calls with 30 or 40 people, all on the phone, trying to diagnose why transactions were being dropped, or the app was slowing down, or a crash happened, when every individual on top of each discrete component, the storage owner, the server owner, the routing owner, the application owner, had their systems management dashboards, and they were all green. And as most of you that have ever lived that life got to experience, at the end of the day, you kind of rebooted the system. 50% or more of those calls result in no diagnosis. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. And they couldn't understand why in a Google-based world in 04, 05, 06, where while they're on these calls, they're ripping out a bunch of Google searches to try and figure out what the problem might be, and they're able to traverse the entire web seamlessly with instantaneous results, why you couldn't do that within a data center. There's less data, there's less moving pieces, and so their initial value prop was, how do I create a Google search for IT operations? And like any good, wise, scrappy founders, with that metaphor, they grabbed Lucene, or Solar, or Nutch, or Elastic, I'm not sure which one of the four, and said, yeah, we know how to do this problem. I'm doing these Google searches. Let me look at a Google search type appliance, and I'll just run logs, because I'm grepping and trying to search across these different log formats for my solution. Let me just run these logs through this text search engine, and voila, I'll have my answer, and I'll get my Google for the enterprise, and I'll find a way to commercialize this open source and make a lot of money. And what they found in talking to lots of different end users and trying this is that wasn't the answer. Relationships between words was not the problem. It was a time series problem. How do I get that huge volume of data through an index that wasn't going to be a text search index, that was going to be a time series index, still unstructured, so a lot of the principles of a Lucene, Solar, Nutch, Elastic type backbone, but it couldn't be the same key value pair text relationship framework if they wanted to solve this problem. So ultimately what we built, starting with logs, was a whole series of a framework for collecting this non-structured and non-replicable data, throwing it into an index, that's a time series index, and in a real-time or semi-real-time basis, spitting out a time series index that would allow you to instantaneously, through our query language, query log these files that were unrelated in all formats. Firewall data, server data, storage data, network data, app data, to try and find the hay in the haystack, the slightly discolored hay. It's not so much a needle in a haystack problem for most of these. It's a whole series of shades of differentiation so that they could actually get to resolution on these calls, or more ideally over time, prevent these issues and start to get more machine learning, predictive, and proactive in nature. We've expanded from that log orientation to being able to ingest all kinds of data. We're grabbing network data across the wire so that we can look at SQL injection attacks. We're grabbing API data. We just got a release with Splunk that's embedded within Docker so that we can actually grab well-mannered data from microservices architecture. We're grabbing API data from mobile apps. So we've opened up the spigot on what type of data, even though most people look at us as a log aggregation system. But the tiering remains the same. A whole series of collection devices that feed a whole series of parallelized indexes that can be in multiple different machines and multiple different locations that feed that are operated on by a whole series of search heads that can also be on multiple machines, multiple locations, interrogating those indexes. And then the secret to Splunk is we've got this great search framework and a language, a super powerful language that structures the data at time of query and then a whole series of visualizations and architectures for remediation and more logical serial handling of output once you decide what you want to do. Because it's this generic platform, we've been used everywhere. So everything from application development, DevOps, software development lifecycle, to where we started, IT operations, to security, compliance, and fraud, to more structured business analytics type problems with marketing, sales, and production environments, manufacturing production environments, to industrial data and Internet of Things. With MuleSoft, what we're trying to add is how do we get these application networks layered in the same way that we're going after these different data centers. So that's what we're working on as two organizations. We've traditionally sold on a go-to-market basis directly into IT, so there's two key buyers that we tend to go after at first, and that's someone that runs a security operations center or has a compliance need, and someone that runs the IT operations framework and really has that, how do I stop these midnight to 4 a.m. phone call issues. But again, we're starting to leverage that initial sale and value that we're driving within customers to get to different use cases. And why we are able to actually do this as a company is there is no scheme. One, we never drop, as we index, we keep the raw data. We don't process the data. We compress it so it's elegantly stored and it doesn't suck up way too much money on the storage side. But anytime that you write a query within Splunk, you can get down to the native raw data that came from a network packet or came from a storage log or came from a mobile app API. So we never discard the raw, which gives us a lot of power in how we utilize this data. And there's no schema. So that old ETL journey and the entity relationship diagrams we all lived through and normalized database work, and that doesn't exist at Splunk. The index manages the storage and access that data, and our language structures the data at time of query. So we call it a schema at read instead of a schema at write, which means that when you make your first successful foray into a company by helping the end user compute person do a much better job of keeping the BYOL laptops and devices up for their customers, that same data can be combined with Symantec or McAfee endpoint security data, and you have security people asking security questions from the combination of those two. They're totally different than the questions that the endpoint manager would be asking from those same systems, and there's no work necessary to touch the data to enable those totally different questions and totally different answers, which is part of that what we call horizontal velocity across organizations. So it provides different people asking different questions of the same data, completely different results, which in a world that we just talked about that's changing minute by minute and eventually will be completely virtualized with no permanent instantiation in most of our systems, it becomes a pretty important characteristic of systems. To give you an example of a customer that's done this pretty effectively, that's a joint customer between the two of us, CocaCola over the past 4 years has moved from a 100% on-prem customer to almost 100% AWS cloud-based customer. They still have a few systems they're dragging over. Incredible velocity for an organization that's over 100 years old and has a boatload of last generation systems. What's interesting about the journey for Splunk and MuleSoft within that account is we were brought in just to try and keep their on-prem systems up. And on that horizontal velocity path, they realized that on top of their IT systems, why don't we actually Splunk these freestyle machines? Has anyone got to try any of these make your own drinks at any of the restaurants they have now? It's pretty cool. You can craft any flavor you want. And it was, again, really pedantic use case. We've got all these machines that we're installing. It's really expensive to service them, and it really sucks for us to be out of commission or out of the right syrup, or we don't want to lose the revenue, so let's Splunk those machines and get more proactive and predictive on truck rolls, on inventory of product, and make sure they don't go down. But as they started, and they already had Splunk their web architecture for all the online interactions. If you guys ever scan one of the Coke cans to try and get a prize and have a user ID to do Coca-Cola contests, they're already Splunking all that infrastructure. And through their journey, they realized, gosh, we got a lot of data on customers. We've got freestyle data. We've got point of sale system data that we can grab from our partner affiliate restaurants. We've got web data. We've got user ID data. Why don't we mash that up and start to understand how do we optimize customer experience? Are there promotions that we could be running in different parts of the city? Are there location services that we can drive if people are really, we know their taste and they're really looking for a special flavor of cherry Coke? And they actually just won an award as what wouldn't be considered the most advanced IT company 3 or 4 years ago for best usage of next generation digital marketing from Information Week 100 just a few weeks ago. And connecting all of that made it possible was MuleSoft. So without the combination of MuleSoft and Splunk, it would have been impossible for Coke to help themselves on this transformation journey. So with MuleSoft, we feel within most of our organizations that we serve, we're able to accelerate their speed and their agility by at least 4x. That's kind of the mark that we set. And all of the return on investment and business value benchmarks that we set for our customers really have that target. If we can't give you a 4x multiple on what you have today, then you might stay where you are or look at some other type of technology. And what we've seen when we go in together with MuleSoft, it's a key ingredient in making sure that we get to this 4x mark. And again, people are going to be in cloud. I can't imagine many on-prem systems living 4, 5, 6 years from now. And if they do, they'll probably be virtualized stacks, whether it's Cloud Foundry or whether it's Azure stack or an AWS stack that are private clouds, but provided in a centrally managed and efficient way. So we're moving to this cloud-first world. API connectivity is absolutely critical. Making sure that we use this middleware to give that type of guidance, like I just described from Coca-Cola, to line of business managers so that a marketing executive or a sales executive or a manufacturing executive can do what they need to do to competitively differentiate their business, I think will be a huge opportunity for each one of us to keep driving. Move from technology, move from middleware, move from APIs and connectivity directly to business value. And we're excited to be working with MuleSoft to make sure that we drive an effective MuleSoft Splunk application that provides more value, more out-of-the-box value for each one of you guys to get that transparency and visibility into these connections. So my closing punchline was MuleSoft gives you seamless integration across fragmented systems and applications. Splunk gives you visibility and intelligence across fragmented systems and applications. And together, if you love MuleSoft, you will absolutely love Splunk. So go try the Splunk Cloud for free today. And I really appreciate your time and support.